Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Short Term Show. We've got a super cool guest today, Adam Chakowski. Got it right?
You get it. First time. I
Okay.
love it.
Awesome. Thank you. So sorry. He's done things a little bit differently, I would say a little unconventional in terms of the way a lot of people on the podcast have done things. So really cool guest, really excited to interview him. How's it going, Adam?
It's going great, Avery. Nice way to start the Monday. Get to talk real estate, especially with one of the goats as I consider in the short-term market. So yeah, it's exciting to talk to you.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for coming on. And let's start off by you just tell us and our listeners a little bit about yourself, where you came from, how you got started in real estate.
Sure. So, like you said, my background is different. Did the old college thing, baseball is my passion back then. And, that's kind of where I wanted to go into after college. And I worked in a few different capacities. I fortunately got in with, a professional team. I worked for the New York Yankees for about 6 years. And then, you kind of have an epiphany. I turned 30 and, just had a life change. I realized I kind of wanted a little bit more in life. I was missing family events, financially money wasn't the best. So, I'm looking for other ways to kind of grow and kind of get back some of my time as much as I loved what I did. So that's when I kind of moved back north. I'm from the Boston area. I kind of took a job in sales, started working there for the next, 7, 8 years. And it's funny enough, all my friends always said, you have a great personality for like sales or like real estate, it's something you should always get into. I never really acted upon it. And then 2020 happens. And I think that was kind of the kick in the butt I needed because I was commission based. So as soon as the world shuts down, my income just dropped. It goes from making X amount of money to now, I'm worried if, we're going to be making income in the next few months. So my girlfriend, fiance, wife, now wife at the time, we started to look into other avenues and I started to dive in BiggerPockets, real estate. So that was the big play, like, oh, okay. Yeah, I really started to read every book I could, really started to get interested in it. And this was the challenge that kind of led me into the short-term realm was at the time we're in 2021. So I thought, okay, maybe we could do a duplex. And all the duplexes in our area were going ridiculous amounts over where the numbers just don't make sense. So my wife, now wife, said, well, what about a short-term market? I said, yeah, I wanted to stay close to home for the first one. And, we're very familiar with Cape Cod, Massachusetts. And, that's a huge destination for vacationers, always has been. And, it's an area where we felt, short-term markets weren't going to be hit or regulations or things like that. So, we started to do some digging and bought the first one conventionally. Now, looking back, I tell people it's not as easy as it sounds because it was literally the second house I saw. I went down by myself. My wife couldn't make it at the time. And this is where you have some good trusting partners. I pretty much, we made an offer without her seeing it as well, without her seeing it. So you got to have some trusting partner to do that as well. But yeah, it was the second house I had seen. Great location. Could definitely use some love over the course of the period of, just adding your own touches to it. But made an offer on it. We didn't have to go over asking price at that point. We did it conventionally. And yeah, that was our first one. So looking back on it, it happened really quick. It was somewhat easy when you think you didn't have too much competition. We pretty much got our offer accepted on the second house we saw. And then, yeah, we got into the fun after that. We spent the next, few weekends over the next 3, 4 months going down every weekend, getting it up to, short-term rental capacity. A lot of small things we had to do, get it decorated, furnish it, kind of add our touches to it so we could get it, up on all the platforms. And then, yeah, we went into it 2022. We pretty much had all the summer booked. We dabble in, kind of doing some midterm stuff in the fall when it's slower. So that was our first one. And then, I started to kind of determine, okay, how can we continue to grow and things like that. So I started to kind of get into certain groups, obviously short-term shop being one of them. Sub two at Pace Morby, I'm a part of as well. But yeah, we're trying to find ways to continue to scale. And now we're starting to really diving into really hopefully growing the portfolio over the next few years.
Awesome. Sounds like you're doing, everything right so far. But I want to back up a little bit. And ask about your job. So you were an MLB scout, which to me sounds like every boy's dream in terms of dream job. Was that your dream job?
It was, yeah, and it was something I love doing every day. Like I have no regrets to this day of doing it. It was one of those jobs you never felt like you worked. I got to meet some really cool people, got to have some great experiences, and it definitely helped develop me into, partly who I am today. But yeah, it gets to a point where, I think the whole reason we're doing real estate now is to get our why is, what is our why? Mine is having financial freedom, but that doesn't mean to me, having a penthouse or driving all the expensive cars. To me, it's being able to spend time with my family, to not have to worry about going to work, to not have to worry about, requesting time off to take a vacation, to see my kids grow up and not have to miss a sporting event or a recital or school play. And that's where I kind of felt I had that realization being in baseball was I was giving up so much time, sacrifice. I was on the road 200 plus days of the year.
Oh, wow.
I talked to guys who had been journeymen, who had been in the game for 30, 40 years. And you just heard too many stories of, I miss my kids' high school graduation. I miss this.
Oh.
Yeah. As much as I love doing it, it was just something I said, I don't know if this is where I can be for the next 20, 30 years, because I feel like I would truly look back and regret that.
I think that's a great reason to quit the dream job. I don't think that you could give a better one, honestly. And I kind of started in the same boat. I had what I thought was my dream job in the music business. And once I got in it, was in it for a couple of years, and we started thinking about having kids. I'm like, the boss that I had was never going to understand something like, oh, my daughter has strep throat, I need to stay home with her. And sure. That didn't feel good. So luckily, I was able to get out of that before we ever had kids. But that was my thought, too, is I'm going to miss a lot of things. And for what? $37,000 and a promotion to $50,000 that I may never get. So real estate really is like just so powerful in terms of being able, not just short-term rentals, any type of just being able to get you that freedom of time that financial freedom gives you.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, no, I feel like, I connect with you definitely in that on the job itself in the previous life. And I think we have that epiphany of wanting something else for ourselves, our family, because, you come to the realization, we're not put on this earth to work till we're 65, 70, just to retire, be too old and tired to travel and enjoy life. We've let it pass us by. So that was definitely the thing I came to a realization after. But yeah, I'm with you. Real estate, I felt, was probably one of the best things I could do for having the most control of my destiny, in a sense. Obviously, there's things we can't predict in real estate, but I felt I didn't want to put my future financial goals in the heart of the stock market or something else I can't control day to day. And nothing against people that do it. It's just, I felt having that control of real estate, I can actually hopefully have more control over my future too.
100%. And you mentioned something else that kind of resonated with me too, because there's a lot of new investors out there who are like running around like chickens with their heads cut off. Where do I buy? Where do I buy? And they're trying to find all these markets that nobody's ever heard of, that they've never heard of. But what you did is you started with a market that you knew, that you were familiar with. And I really do think that is the key to being successful with short terms. You absolutely need the data. You absolutely need all these other things to fall into place, but there's really no substitute for knowing your market. And what do you have to say about that?
Oh, 100%, especially for, like you said, for someone who's new, that is kind of scared to jump in and doesn't really know, or maybe they want to be hands-on and, oh, what if something happens? I need to be close to my property. I can't jump on a plane. Yeah, I think if you're within a few hours drive, I think it gives people that confidence to invest who maybe are scared to take that jump. And like you said, to your point, you really know the market. So if you live in an area where, you have a national park close by, or like for us, it's Cape Cod, which is an hour and a half, 2 hours away. If you have something like that, then you already have a head up of everyone else who's trying to get into that market, who's from outside that market. So I think, that's a good place to start, start looking at vicinities within, what your comfort level is. Maybe that's 2 or 3 hour drive, and start to look around what's there. There's so many untapped hit markets for short-term rentals that, you just don't see every day, over social media or wherever else we're seeing it.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. So you started with the one in Cape Cod, but you have multiple properties now, right?
Yeah. So we're up to three. And, it was one of those things for me. I've always been it takes me more time. You see people that all of a sudden scale to like 100 properties within a few years. Me, I've always kind of been a little bit slower for that. That's just always been my path with everything, it seems like. So yeah, I really started to dive in the past few years of really kind of the investor side, not just, okay, go get a loan, put 20% down. There's so many ways, like, to scale. That could be finding off-market properties, using DSCR lenders, private money lenders. So I really took some time to really immerse myself in that part of the investor side so I can find ways to really scale the portfolio and build upon that. So, and that was where I started to go to real estate conferences, meet some people I've teamed up with now, been able to partner with some really great people. And we're actually in the midst of closing on a 6-unit portfolio in Iowa City, which, we have some exit strategies there of keeping it long term, but we also have some opportunities to convert it into short term and midterm to really capitalize revenue there. So I think that's what the plan is. And some people I talked to that I know in the short term market, the first thing was like Iowa City. It's not really a market that jumps up when you're talking short term and midterm, but it was a market I was a little familiar with, but also did some digging on. And we saw that there really is a need for the short term and midterm market. So, sometimes when you do that investigation, you'll come across markets you didn't even think existed that could, be a very good fit for those.
So, well, let's talk about that. So how did you come across Iowa City?
Yeah. So my partners, we met through conferences, through all, and we became friends, things like that. And we decided, okay, we kind of had the same visions of, two of us had short-term rental backgrounds, but we also had aspirations of kind of growing and going into multifamily as well. So we were like, okay, let's start figuring out markets. And we kind of each chose a few, and we kind of settled on Iowa just because we felt, okay, it's a fairly safe area for just crime, jobs, growth rates, like all these things you're looking for when you're investing in real estate. We felt it was a good market to appreciate in. It's not going to be like a Dallas market or Tampa market, but we felt it was a very safe market to be in. And then we started to just develop relationships with brokers, agents, trying to find things on market, off market. And it was just brought to us as a deal. Like the broker said, hey, we have these 2 duplexes. And I think the best question you can always ask when you're building those relationships is, okay, do they have any other properties? And that's kind of where that came from. They said, oh, yeah, by the way, they have 6 condos in Iowa City that they're looking to sell as well. So it gave us an opportunity to also package things together to, instead of just going after one property, now we're going after 6. And then, yeah, we kind of did some more investigation on it, the condos itself, made sure, the HOA documents didn't restrict any sort of rental requirements. And then, yeah, we just kind of fell upon the idea of like turning it into short-term, midterm, but also having this long-term rental back as a backup in case, the city shuts it down tomorrow or the HOA comes in and shuts it down.
Yeah. Yeah. Those exit strategies are very important when you're going into more untapped markets than some of the bigger mega markets, I call them, because you just kind of never know. And some of them, they'll never do anything. Like I called the city of Starkville, where I'm from, and they were like, yeah, we're never gonna, it got brought up a couple of times in city council, but we're never gonna mess with that. It's just they basically said it's too much of a headache to try and deal with, so they don't care what you do. But yeah, it is good to have those exit strategies when you're in those seemingly random markets.
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's just doing your due diligence. And, we can never predict everything that's going to happen, but yeah, you just, as an investor, you have to prepare for all types of scenarios.
Totally. And I love that you asked if they had other properties that they wanted to sell. And that's so important. And it's important also when you're choosing your agent, who I like to have an agent who does a lot of deals because they'll have a lot of past clients. I got a great deal on a set of 7 duplexes because my agent saw it hit the market. She was not the listing agent. And she said, oh, I know that guy. He owns the entire street. So she went to the listing agent and said, hey, my people will buy all 7 of them if he wants to sell all 7 of them. And he did. And we bought them all. So it's just the networking. And I hate the word networking. I hate being networked, but the connections between all the different people involved in a deal and how many like degrees away you are from getting more deals just between 1 or 2 agents is crazy.
This episode is brought to you by the premier short-term rental Facebook group, Short-Term Rental Long-Term Wealth. We have nearly 50,000 members, and this is the biggest independently owned and operated STR Facebook group, and it has been curated by yours truly, Cashflow Carl. Join us on Facebook. Search the groups for Short-Term Rental Long-Term Wealth. That's Short-Term Rental Long-Term Wealth on Facebook. This episode of the Short Term Show has been brought to you by your friendly short-term shop real estate agent. We are hyper-local and totally dedicated to your success. Whether you want to buy your next short-term rental or sell the one you currently own, we would be honored to earn your business. We are in all of the best vacation markets in America. Find us at theshorttermshop.com. That's theshorttermshop.com. Brokered by EXP.
100%. And I feel like you said there's certain keywords that kind of I feel get overplayed, like networking or adding value. I'm not saying those aren't important. It's just like we hear these words that get overplayed in real estate. And I'm with you. Networking is just paramount. And, I think people think it's like some big science, and it really isn't. It part of it's just being yourself and just talking to people and just finding out what they do, telling them what you're doing as well. And if you do it right, it just starts to happen organically. I feel like so many new people, they go out to network and they're like, oh geez, I got to find X, Y, and Z. And yeah, you want to be directed in your networking for sure. You want to connect with the right people, but if you're just if you're just yourself and you just start having normal conversations, it starts taking care of itself.
Totally. And you can totally tell if you're out when you're being networked or if someone is having a legitimate, genuine conversation with you. Y'all don't come up to me and network me. Come up to me and tell me like your cool story. I want to hear that stuff. I don't want to be everybody can tell when you're not being genuine in your conversations with people. And then you feel stuck in the conversation. I'm a gigantic introvert anyway, and I have trouble being in conversations with people. So when it feels stressed and like strained and forced is the word I'm looking for, because you're trying to network, I'm like, I don't even know what to say. So anyway, be genuine is the takeaway from this little piece of the conversation.
100%. Yeah. Don't overcomplicate the networking. Like you said, just be genuine, be yourself, and it all figures itself out.
Totally does. So what made you decide because it doesn't sound like you're trying to do like a boutique hotel or anything. What made you decide? Because very, very few people decide to do this. I think I'm the only one that I know, maybe a handful of other people, go from single family short-term to multifamily, potentially not short-term. What made you decide to do that?
Yeah, it was, I think, as you dive into real estate, everyone starts to have this shiny object syndrome because we start to see all these avenues you can go, right? There's so many ways you can invest and be a part of real estate. It's not just buying and holding properties. But for me, it was also, I wanted to buy and hold, but I also wanted to scale up and, just see for me, what would be the best path to achieving that, what I considered financial freedom for me. And that's kind of when I started to dive in and think bigger. Someone I've met through mentorships and groups, and one of mine, she is from locally in my area, and I met her and she was talking to me about what I wanted to do. And I said, oh, eventually I'd like to get into multi. And she kind of stopped me. She goes, well, why not now? Well, I said, oh, I don't have the experience to do this. And she kind of stopped me again. She goes, well, start thinking bigger, faster. And that's something that's always stayed with me over the past couple of years is think bigger, faster. So that's kind of what led me into looking at the larger multis. I like that challenge. I liked the fact that you could, dive in and have a group too. You weren't in it by yourself. You could actually help assemble a team to start taking down some larger portfolios and some bigger rewards. And then, hopefully again, lead down to the path of, being able to quit the W-2 and focus on this full time.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I don't know why it seems like multifamily investors don't ever really get into short-term, and short-term rental investors kind of don't ever scale into other types, because the thing that I've heard the most is, well, it's not worth it. I make more on the short terms. But if you do it at scale with multifamily or single family long-term, it does make sense. It's not going to be a 1 or 2 properties and done scenario. But if you stick with it and keep at it and grow that side of the portfolio, then eventually you're making as much as your short-term rentals and you're not having to deal with it as much. Although there's different crap to deal with. Like we had a tenant burn down our apartment building. So with a cigarette, not purposely, carelessly. So, there's other crap to deal with, but I think it's really important to have a little bit of everything in your portfolio, because you just never know what the economy is going to do, what people are going to do. We just don't know.
Oh, 100%. And I've kind of been a proponent of, this is where I kind of relate to stock markets. Like, you have to diversify a little bit to exactly what you just said. And I think we're seeing it now. A lot of short-term people are seeing their markets decline a little bit, or maybe they're putting up regulations and they're trying to, it's not gangbusters like it was in 21 and 22, where you could be, in my opinion, have a mediocre property and be a mediocre owner and operator and still have 100% capacity, just because the market was so booming during that time. But now, and we've seen it too in our market, where it's starting to kind of stabilize again and kind of go back to normalcy. But because our market got so saturated, a lot of those mediocre operators don't know how to handle it, and they're not seeing the revenue come in. So to your point, I feel like, yes, you definitely have to diversify, because if you have changes in those markets and have all your eggs in that basket, then you might be scrambling at that point if you're not prepared for it.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. And I mean, we saw it in COVID. Like, I thought that first 2 weeks that, oh, well, there go the short terms. Good thing we have these 40 long terms, or however many we had at the time. But it was actually the opposite. We sat around for 2 weeks. Then the short terms like totally boomed. And then we were like, oh my God, now we have to worry about the long terms, because they have these eviction moratoriums. So the short terms are fine. So within a 2-week period, we were either worried about this end of our portfolio or that end of our portfolio. But whichever way that pendulum swung, we were good, because we had both. So I think that's super important.
Oh, yeah. And it's stressful too. If you're just banking on that one area, and like you said, if you're just long-term and you're dealing with the moratoriums, I mean, it was a very stressful time for landlords and owners at that time. But like you said, if you had something to kind of back you up and protect you on some other ends, yeah, it was. So that's why I feel like diversifying is definitely important in this game.
You mentioned something about not forcing deals to happen. So is there a specific incident that happened that makes you say that?
Yeah, I think for anything I've learned, I think for me, being in my background, when I left baseball to go into sales, I realized you never want to force numbers. You never want to force deals, just because, especially with underwriting, anyone can make the numbers work. Anyone can make numbers look like gold when it really isn't. And I had a situation where I had an opportunity about a year ago to buy again in Cape Cod. It was a great property. It was definitely great location. It was on a golf course. It hit all the bells and whistles you really want for a really strong short-term rental. And this was a situation where we, to talk about different ways to buy, this was a situation where we actually had an opportunity to maybe do a seller financing deal on this, because it was a free and clear property. The seller just didn't go down here very often. And I tell everyone with this type of creative stuff, it's not a fit for every single deal. I know we hear of these things subject to creative finance, conventional DSCR. You have to really understand the situation and know that not everything's always going to fit that sale every single time. So it was a situation where we made the offer. The seller kind of had second thoughts after we kind of agreed to the initial letter of intent. They came back and changed a lot of terms that really would have put a damper on some things and made it a little bit more stressful and kind of tight. We couldn't come to an agreement there, and we felt that, okay, we're not going to push the numbers. We're not going to force something that isn't potentially there, because if we're incorrect on these numbers, this could really come back to really hurt us in the end. So I would feel more comfortable with just walking away and saying, hey, unfortunately, we can't do this. If it does change, let us know. Always keep that line of communication open. Don't always assume it's just a dead deal. And if it is, then, I'd rather just walk away knowing we're not going to be in trouble a year from now because we force numbers.
I think that is really great advice, especially now in the age of a lot of people looking for owner financing or subject to. I've seen several people get so excited over the fact that they've gotten a seller to agree to subject to that they are paying wild prices. I'm not talking about, 2 or 3% over to make it worth the seller's time to do this subject to deal. I'm talking about like $850 on a property that's worth $650. And
Sure.
It's probably not going to get above $850 again for a long time. I mean, I know we just had a big push of appreciation. We'll probably have another big push of appreciation when rates tick down. If they do, I think we're going to see another buyer surge and multiple offers. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing? Why did you do that? Well, it'll get there eventually. I'm like, but what if something happens and you need to sell this and you can't sell it because it's just, you can't, I just think that was so wise of you to just say, you know what, I'll wait for the next one and not say, oh my God, it's owner financing. I got to get it. I got to get this door. I got to add this door to my door count.
Yeah. And like you said, you could easily have said, okay, well, I'll offer an extra $200,000. And at least for me, in my learning and in experience, the one thing I don't want to assume is the natural or organic appreciation of the market because I have zero control over that. Like you said, we like to think it will, but if I'm paying $300,000 over what today's market says, I'm really banking now that has to appreciate another $300,000. Because what happens if something changes or I need to refinance out my seller on the seller financing deal, and now I go to a bank and they can't, or DSCR won't because the ratio doesn't work anymore because I overpaid $300,000. So yeah, it's a quick way to get yourself in trouble too if you're not understanding the numbers and making sure you're being realistic. It's hard for us to take the emotion out, especially if you're new.
It is.
Because you're like, oh my God, I'm so excited. It's my first property. I want to be, have 100 properties over the next 5 years. So that emotion, I think, can cloud our judgment with those numbers sometimes. And I think it's so important to take emotion out of it, read what the numbers are, be realistic, and also be conservative too. It's nice to have the pipe dream of these are the optimistic numbers. This is where I feel as an operator I can get us to, but be realistic. Expect downturns, expect things to slow down.
Yeah. The entire deal has to make sense, not just the one piece that you were initially looking for.
100%.
All right, Adam. So we're running out of time and we have 3 questions that we ask every guest who comes on our show. The first one is, what advice would you give 20-year-old Adam?
I love that question. It's one of those things I look back and say, I wish I knew then what I know now. But at the same time, what I've learned too, Avery, is that my path has always been there for a reason. I've been through everything for a reason. I would tell myself back then, don't rush things. Don't always think that you're 20 years old. We always think we have to have everything figured out, or we do have it all figured out because, we're out in the real world now. Don't put so much pressure on yourself to be where you want to be in 10 years now. I think that'd be the best thing aside from trying to give myself more education on, financial freedom and investing, things like that, things that I would say they didn't teach us in school.
Yeah, there's a lot they didn't teach us in school, unfortunately.
Yeah, we could have a whole podcast on that. All the things they didn't teach us back then.
Well, second question, kind of similar to the first one. What advice would you give a new investor who's looking to get started today in the middle of 2024?
Now is the best time. Don't always say, I'm going to wait till the market comes down. I'm going to wait till rates come down. There's going to be deals in no matter what the market's doing. There's deals out there. You just have to find them. At some point, they may be harder to find than others during other times, but don't let that stop you. And don't let paralysis by analysis happen either, because I feel like for newbies, that's two of the things I hear the most for why they're not getting into the market or doing this. And if you continue to say that, you're going to be sitting 10 years from now saying the same exact thing. And you're going to wish you took that step 10 years ago. That's why I say take the steps now. Now is the best time.
Totally agree with that. And last, what's your favorite book that's impacted your mindset?
So when I saw this, I was like, geez, I had so many books that came to mind, but one that really resonated with me that I've read over the past, a couple of years is The Power of One with Ed Milet. So that talks about how we're a lot closer to a lot of our goals than we think. Sometimes we're in the trenches. We think something is so far away, it's so unattainable, that's so far off. But if you continue to be consistent and persistent, we forget that we are probably a lot closer than we think. And sometimes it's just taking that power of just doing one more, making one more offer, finding one more property. You're that much closer to finding your next deal.
That is a great one. I don't think anyone has recommended that yet. Well, Adam, thank you so much for coming on. If our listeners want to find you, follow you, all that fun stuff, how do they do that?
Yeah, so I'm on Instagram. I can drop my Instagram handle in here. It is kind of a play on words from my previous life. So it's scouting, the number 4 in wealth. So it's scouting for wealth. That's what I'm out there doing now is looking for more properties and looking to grow the portfolio and ultimately, get out of the W2 rat race. So yeah, they're happy to connect there and share anything I can. And I can't thank you guys enough for having me on. So it's been an honor.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on. It was a great conversation.